All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Superintendent Carol Kavanaugh, and for the purpose of reorganization, I will preside over the beginning part of this meeting. In accordance with School Committee Policy BDA, which you can see projected on the screen, what will happen tonight is the following. For the purpose of organizing, at its first regular meeting following the district's annual elections, the school committee will elect from its membership a chairperson and a vice chairperson. Both the chairperson and vice chairperson will hold their respective offices for a term of 1 year or until a successor is elected. The superintendent of schools will call to order the annual organizational meeting and conduct the election of a chairperson. A majority of the members of the school committee will constitute a quorum. The election will proceed as follows. Nominations for the office of chairperson will be made from the floor by another member of the school committee without the need for it to be seconded. The chairperson will be elected by a majority roll call vote of the members present and voting. If no nominee receives a majority vote, the election will be declared null and void, and the nominations will be reopened. Upon the election, a new chairperson will preside, calling for the election of a vice chairperson. The procedure used for the election will be the same as that for electing the chairperson. And so at this time, I will take nominations for chairperson of the Hopkinton School Committee for the 21-22 school year.
Do individuals have to express interest first, or does that have after they're nominated?
They can choose to accept the nomination or not.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have a nomination.
Who's your nomination?
I would like to nominate Nancy Kavanaugh.
I was going to do that.
Yeah. Her chair for this year. Nancy has been an outstanding vice chair, and in the past she has been also an excellent chair. And I would feel very well tended to if she served as our chair this year.
Right. Thank you.
I second that.
You don't even have to.
Does it need a vote, though?
It does not need a second, but we will do a roll call vote, yes.
Okay.
And we'll need a majority by roll call vote. So Nancy, are you willing to accept the position of chair?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote, and I'll just start over on that side with you, Joe.
Aye.
Leah?
Aye.
Meg? Amanda?
Oh, sorry.
Aye.
And Nancy?
Aye.
Okay, very good. So we have a new chair of the school committee, Nancy Kavanaugh, for the 21-22 school year.
Thank you.
And I will hand this meeting over to you.
Thank you, and thank you all for your confidence. So I guess at this time I will open the floor for nominations for the vice chair.
I would like to nominate Amanda Farciano for vice chair.
So do we do discussion or do we go, because we don't need a second, we go, first of all, are you willing to accept the nomination?
I am willing to accept the nomination.
Do we want to go ahead then and have a roll call? I'll start with you, Joe, because I'm looking.
Sure. Aye.
Okay. Leah?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
I am an aye. And Amanda?
And I as well.
All right, then you are the new vice chair, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. At this time, looking at our agenda, I am going to invite all who are here who would like to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So do we want to start next with recognitions, Dr. Kavanaugh?
Sure thing. So I am very pleased tonight to have with us Eva Bennett, who is a 9th grader at Hopkinton High School, and she was recently awarded the 4th award in Translational Medical Science category for her project, Development of an Innovative Alternative Model for Teratogenicity Testing. You might have to help me with that. She earned the opportunity to compete at the Regeneron Science Fair after winning first place at the regional level and second place at the state level. And so the rest of this press release is really some of the things that you had to say, so I would invite you to come up now, and you could certainly bring your teacher with you if you would like as well. Hi, Eva.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit about your project, please.
So my project, as you said, is the development of an innovative teratogenicity testing model. Teratogenicity is birth defects, so So yeah, so my project was inspired by, so I have some family friends or friends and people close to me that have birth defects. I have an aunt with heart defects that needed to be corrected with surgery when she was a baby. A close family friend of mine has cleft lip. A child in a class I volunteer at has a missing finger, and a dear elementary school classmate of mine has Down syndrome. So over the summer, while I was learning about COVID vaccine development, I learned that medicines and vaccines need to be tested in pregnant animals before they can be tested in pregnant women. So this is, it's expensive and it takes a very long time, and it uses a lot of pregnant animals. 26 million mammals are used yearly in the U.S. for new medicine R&D. So I was looking to find a new model to test for birth defects. And so that's what my project was, development of a model for teratogenicity testing. And then, so I found planaria, which is a flatworm that has regeneration capabilities, which means it can regrow its head and eyes. And these capabilities are very similar to the way the human embryo develops, the way their head and eyes develops. So, yeah, and then, so I amputated the head and tail of the planaria to be able to start the growth of the planaria. So to test the birth defects, I also needed a chemical that is known to cause birth defects in humans. So that I used retinol, which is a form of vitamin A, and high doses of vitamin A are known to cause birth defects in humans. So I used retinol, and I exposed the planaria to differing concentrations of retinol for 14 days, as that's how long it takes for them to properly regenerate without being exposed to retinol. And so at the end of my project, so the results were, as the concentrations increased, the development of the head and eyes were delayed. And in the two highest concentrations, there was cyclopia, which is only one eye, and this is a defect found in humans as well. So, yeah. And then, so these results together showed that my project, that could have been that planaria could be a potentially innovative teratogenicity testing models that is faster and more cost-effective than the traditional animal testing, and it can also reduce the amount of pregnant mammals that are used currently.
Oh my goodness.
Impressive. That's great.
That's amazing, truly amazing. Mrs. Murphy, would you like to tell us a little bit about sort of what it means to go to National Science Fair?
So Eva is a 9th grader at Hopkinton High School and was fully remote this year. So everything that you just heard, she was doing in her home. So thank you to the many parents, including the parents that are here tonight, that let students take over their kitchen tables and in their basements. And Eva did a great job communicating and staying really responsible, talking with me about what materials she might need that I could drive over and drop in her driveway. I mean, really just making the most of every opportunity throughout the experience. She did a great job at the school fair, went on to compete at regionals, states, and then made it all the way to the international fair, which I've now been at Hopkinton for about 10 years, and this is the first student in my time here that's made it to the international fair. So she got to meet other students, talk to some interesting scientists, obviously not the same as being in person, but still in quintessential Eva fashion, made the most of every chance to learn and grow and connect with different scientists. So as you can probably tell, a very talented student who really just shined this year and did such a great job, and we're so proud of her and so lucky to have these young scientists that are eager to make these great contributions and prove so many things that we don't even maybe think of as big challenges. So she's creative, hardworking, and did such a great job. So congratulations, Eva.
Thank you.
And only a freshman.
Only a freshman, yeah.
What will happen next?
Did you say 26 million mammals?
26 million mammals are used in the U.S. every year for new medicine R&D. Yeah.
So it sounds like your project will be really impactful.
Yeah, it still needs some further testing to validate the false positives and false negatives with more chemicals, but I hope that it can eventually become a Tier 1 screening or testing model.
Wow. You must be very proud. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very impressive. I guess we'll see you in medical school in about 8 years.
Hopefully, yes.
Very impressive. Good work. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, too.
I'm curious, will you continue this topic next year? Take it further, or will you go into something else?
I'm not completely sure, but if I was to continue this topic next year, I would like to be able to test the false positives and false negatives with non-teratogens and teratogens. And I would also like to be able to understand the molecular pathways of how the teratogenicity is caused and how in the planaria and in the humans, to understand if they're the same or if they're different, which is very helpful for the science, yeah.
That's fabulous. Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, and congratulations. It's so
you for
nice for
having
us
me.
to have
Oh,
you know,
yes.
the opportunity to see some student work and to see some student greatness at our meetings, because very often we're just doing business here. So,
Thank you for having me.
It's a great
Thank
topic
you.
and very well done and very well communicated.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm highly impressed. I don't think at your grade I was thinking about anything close to what you just discussed. I'm pretty sure I was playing video games on Nintendo. So, thank you.
Thank you.
It's an amazing topic.
Thank you.
yes, I'm going to learn how to pronounce it after this meeting.
I know, me too.
It took me some time to properly pronounce it.
Well,
But
thank
yeah.
That makes me feel a little bit better.
Me too. So thank you very much, Eva, for coming tonight. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of your support. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So would we like to take Mr. Cormier out of order here and bump him ahead? Is that
You
Okay
don't
with
want to
people?
make him loiter in this
as
90-degree room?
enjoyable as this is? If that's all right with you.
Besides having to follow Eva,
What have you discovered lately?
What have you done with a flatworm?
that was amazing.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
Now I don't know that I even want to do this right now. But thank you for giving me this opportunity. I believe you guys have all seen the proposal. As we discussed earlier this year during the budget proposal, was a request to make the administrative assistant position currently occupied by Lou Sanborn from 0.5 to 1.0. And thankfully that was approved. As we started to look at the realities of putting this together and having, as I think many of you know, Lou was going to have to sort of choose where she was 0.5 in one position and 0.5 in another position, and both went to 1.0, which is great, but there's not two of Lou. And just talking to her and Tim Person and Evan Bishop and also Dr. Kavanaugh, we were really looking at this as kind of the time to make this position really, I think, what we need to fully support the athletic program. And I think by just tweaking the title and the role slightly, will put us in a much better position. To be honest, Lou currently probably does things outside of her, because she's just so good at her job. But I would like to have it where this is, part of the job responsibilities, so that moving forward, whenever Lou decides to retire, we're filling a position with a very clear expectation of what it involves. And honestly, I just think it will make our athletic department function more smoothly and more efficiently.
Questions? Comments or anything from the committee?
I guess the first question people would have is, was this an oversight when you brought it to us before, or was it just that you needed more time in the new 1.0 position to see how it played out?
It's a good question. I don't know that it was either necessarily. It was really just sort of an organic process as I really in my second year in this position, and looking at what I think would make the most sense for this 1.0 position and what will make our department function. Because the reality is the predominant part of the role will still be the administrative aspects, which is what we requested. But this would just also, as it says in here, I'm not that important, but there is only one of me. And so when I'm not here for any reason whatsoever, someone's looking for someone to provide an answer to. And this will help provide that answer.
Okay.
I have to say that I am always very happy to see somebody's skills be taken into account as opposed to their title, and then being moved into a more appropriate title if that's the case. And so I think this was a very thoughtful thing. I'm very for it. It doesn't seem to affect us much, if at all, and it seems like it'll give somebody a growth path that they didn't have before. So.
Dr. Kavanaugh, did you want to add anything in terms of your recommendation?
No, so what I think about this position is it will probably do a couple of things. It would give the successful candidate, if that person is Lou, just a little bit more authority than Lou currently has in her position. So, for example, if we're deciding to cancel a game because of rain or something, right now Rich is sort of the sole decision maker around that. And so with an assistant, per se, he'd be able to have someone else do that in his absence if necessary. And I think it also allows a little more flexibility in terms of her hours, or the successful candidate's hours, because right now it's sort of an 8 to 4-ish kind of a position. But you know that for kids, athletics start after school. And so if you can flex a little bit more of her time so that she's out in the fields in the afternoon if we need her there, or communicating with the trainer, or any of those kinds of things, we have sort of that leeway to make that happen. And as Rich said, she does a lot of the work that we would be asking her to do now without the title. So in some ways, it's a little bit perfunctory as well. But as he said, it really was an organic kind of process, and I would certainly endorse it.
Oh, so good.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Kavanaugh, can you just clarify, because I know we had, because of the nature of last year, we had many positions came up and some were temporary and all that. I know we had a number of positions we approved or moved from 0.5 to 1.0. Wasn't this one of them? I do need a little refresher, right? So if we can back up. And my question is really the same as to Rich. It was, if we just looked at this just a few months ago, I think, and we moved from 0.5 to 1.0, why didn't we make this request then? I'm not against it, I'm for it, but I just am thinking about the process.
Sure. So, right, what we know about Lou's position is that it used to be split. 50% of her time was given to building and grounds, 50% of her time was given to athletics, and in both of those situations, she was primarily doing administrative tasks, or at least that's what we would have been asking her to do, even if she sort of stretched herself a little bit and stepped outside of that role. When we came to the school committee budgetarily, we said we're going to need to take Lou and make her full-time in building and grounds and full-time in athletics, but because there aren't two Lou's, but there are two 1.0 positions,
yeah.
We will now have a full-time person for building and grounds and a full-time person for athletics. And it was in kind of the process of having conversations, and Rich, you're probably better able to answer this than I am, where Rich and Tim and Lou were having these conversations, and when they were talking really about the demands of the job or the demands of the role, that's when sort of organically, as Rich said, the idea came about, why not just rename it and kind of change the hours and flex it a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. That gives me the proper sequence, and you actually did say all those things, but now that I'm hearing it in the right sequence, I get it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciated the memo that you submitted, because I think it's clear, reading it, it was clear that we have a mismatch between demand and supply. I mean, your department clearly has demands that you and a part-time admin assistant, even a full-time admin assistant, there are still demands that are not being met. So my concerns, I think, are probably more operational. I think this doesn't impact our budget, but I guess in that, we funded this based on the administrative need, which seemed completely valid at the time. I guess I would just ask you and Dr. Kavanaugh to consider over the year, what are we asking of you, and what are we asking of the assistant? And is it that we're asking too much? Like, I think you mentioned night games, for example, and I know that we have a provision that we can staff a night game with a stipended substitute for you, because clearly you're not going to be at 100 night games. I mean, it's a lot. So I don't really know the economics of a stipended person versus you, or what our expectations of you are. And so I guess my question for you to work out, because it's really not a school committee question probably, is have we been clear? Because it sounds like your expectation of yourself is that you're everywhere, and I think that's a tough demand to fill. So if there's some way that we can clarify what is best for students, how important is it for you personally to be there versus an assistant AD versus a stipended admin substitute, that would make sense to me. And how can we look at the assistant AD role to help ensure that athletics sort of fully embodies the culture and the values of the district? I think they do, but how can we sort of institutionalize that more with more administrative overhead? So those are, I think, probably more operational, but just kind of the things that came to mind as I was thinking about it.
And those are conversations that Dr. Kavanaugh and Mr. Bishop and I have already started to have in the hopes that this might come to fruition. And then if it does come to fruition, those will be further conversations that we have to really divide the specific duties. And again, ultimately, the final decisions will still come, and I shouldn't even say to me because they're not my final decisions, but most of the decisions athletically would still be through me, Mr. Bishop, and Dr. Kavanaugh.
Excellent. So if there are no other comments, I would entertain if there's a motion that anyone would like to make.
Can I just say, Nancy, I think Amanda's going to do really well as a vice chair. I thought those were very insightful comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
I would like to make a motion to approve the transition.
I will second.
Okay, so motion by Meg, second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So thank you very much for coming. That passes, and we look forward to seeing what it brings next year.
Terrific. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for being at the 100 night games too.
yeah.
I mean, you are a visible presence everywhere, so it's really
We're done with games for today.
Okay.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth.
Good night, Rich.
So just for clarity, I had asked him just because I was trying to bring anybody that's speaking from outside so they're not trapped in our meetings. So do we want to do the HEF grants as well out of order?
I think we do.
Do you want to come on up and sit up here next to?
Hello. Hi.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, it's nice to see you not on Zoom.
I know.
As well.
So the next portion of our meeting is to ask the school committee to approve all of the very generous HEF grants this year. And I think that they are in excess of $35,000.
Correct. $37,409.
Yes, it's amazing. And you can see some of these projects. But I'm just going to ask you to talk to us a little bit about the projects and your process, and we couldn't be more grateful. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I'm Chris Fredericks, for anybody who hasn't met me before. I'm current president of the Hopkinton Education Foundation. Our mission is to support innovation in education, and we do that through fundraising and then turning those funds into grants for all of the Hopkinton schools. We have a nearly 25-year tradition of doing this. This particular year has been interesting for all of us, and we really stepped up to the challenge by funding 2 grant cycles this year, which is highly unusual for us. We just felt there was a real need in the fall to deal directly with some of the educational needs during the pandemic. And so thank you all for accepting our offers for grants in the fall. And we were able to do our more typical grant cycle again in the spring. We have a great variety of grants that were submitted by the administrators and teachers across all the different schools. We have a grant review and approval process where we debate the merits of the grants, and particularly if they fit with our mission, which is innovation in education. So if they meet the criteria of the grants and we have all of our questions answered, then we take a vote to fund the ones which we are able to fund for the year. So we have some really, really fun ones, all the way from marathon up to high school this year. So at Marathon, we have a Mindfulness Matters grant where we're going to be funding some baskets full of tools for manage stress and anxiety. There's some books, there's some manipulatives, so some great things that Kelly Pickens and group has put together for the little ones in our community. We have creepy crawling composters, which will be at Hopkins, which is another fun fifth grade science team exercise to teach the science and STEM skills around composting and what the scientific method associated with those will be. We have Lauren Party at Hopkins, who is doing a Changemaker literature project, put together a fantastic curriculum to bring some very new types of books into this very young curriculum at the 4th and 5th grade level about racial awareness and transgender and some really great topics that aren't typically part of that library so far. And she's put a whole curriculum about using them in small groups and larger groups and checkouts. So it looks really, really fascinating. We're really excited about that. Bruce LeBlanc put probably the most fun grant we've seen in a long time together. This is a workable piece. This is at the middle school for 7th grade students to do cosplay and role-playing for ancient Athens and how the government and debates work, and we can't wait to see the outcome of that, if the students really get into learning history through role-playing history, so that'll be super exciting. Ellen Keller for middle school and high school put in a grant application for something which really strikes close to our hearts, we think is incredibly important for mental health literacy. So a smaller pre-pilot was done. It looked very successful. We want to now expand it to all the grade 8 and 9 students to really learn more about mental health, the issues, what are around us, how to get help, et cetera, and how to respond to others who may be in need. So we, again, are super excited to be able to help out with that. We have another high school grant for Liz Petruska for Zero Energy and Sustainable Housing. This is, again, a STEM-based initiative where students will build prototypes of sustainable housing and, again, do the scientific methods for comparison. So such fun ideas this year. We have Samantha Breen doing a sophomore English choice book unit where a lot more varied titles will be able to be purchased so that it can be more peer-to-peer recommendations of books to read at that level than some of the more traditional titles that we've been using in the past. And our largest grant this year to Jim Cousins in the high school. This is over $22,000 for the new control room, the high school studio control room. Really exciting ideas how to bring it to the next level. And the way it was described was going from almost a TV show to an entire TV station, like of all multiple things happening at once, some really next level equipment to bring the kids kind of past their TikToks into something that's a little bit more leverageable going forward. So we are super excited. I have to do a shout out. We can't do any of this without the support of the administration, the teachers, and most importantly, the parents and businesses in our community that have been sponsoring all of our fundraisers. I'd like to thank a teacher fundraiser that's happening right now. So a little plug for that. So thank you. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions, comments?
I'd love to talk about the slide that I just put up. This was the very last slide of my superintendent report, and I chose to incorporate it because yesterday I was chatting with Jim Cousins, and he actually got so emotional. One of the things that came up in our HCAM hour is that Hopkinton is an amazing place to live because you never go without. If there's something that you really, really need, you can find a way to get it. And when you funded $22,000 for his TV studio, he is beyond himself emotional. So thank you so much for that, and for all of the others too. But it was so nice for me to see kind of just the raw emotion of one of your recipients. It's beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you.
It's always exciting when we get to hear the fun grants that you're doing in all of the schools. So thank you for all your work with fundraising and for making these opportunities available for our schools. So, anybody else want to say anything?
I am, overwhelmed by the generosity of the foundation. This is amazing. As you know, I was voted in during COVID and very late in the year. So I don't think I got to see the normal cycle of the grants. So this is incredible. Thank you.
It's really the community committed to the success of our children in education. It's really, so I accept on behalf of the whole community and all of HEF. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As a former HEF board member myself, I always read the entire, grant package, and it's always exciting to see the innovation that's coming into our schools through HEF. So thank you, and good luck with the Thank a Teacher campaign, too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that you hit on so many of the key themes in our district, whether it's STEM. I mean, this is phenomenal. So many kids find their home in the TV studio in the district and then go on to do it in college or whatever. But you've also hit on mental health, and you hit on, with the literacy components, the racial justice, and so many things that are so important to us are reflected in these grants. And it just helps to reinforce the education that we're focused on through the strategic plan. So it's just invaluable. Thank you so much.
Just echoing the thanks that everyone has given you, but it's wonderful to see the variety of topics here that kind of meets the variety of minds in the school. So thank you for being attentive to different ways of learning.
Thank you.
So I would entertain a motion to accept all of the HEF grants as presented.
I would like to make that motion.
I'll second.
So motion by Meg, a second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your hard work.
Yeah.
We are
Tough,
so
tough time to be
appreciative. Thank you.
fundraising, I'm sure, with it, everything having been shut down and remote for so
A
much.
lot of our options that we used to do in the past, things like galas, things like even the Boston Marathon bibs, those have not been open to us. So it's been a tough fundraising year, but we really, again, appreciate the generosity. Everybody has dug deep because this is such an important thing for our community. So we'll get that fundraising back up next year, I'm sure.
And thank a teacher for now, right?
And for right now,
Thank you.
thank you all so very much.
Thank you again.
Have a good night.
Good night. So circle back, I do not see any public comment here, but I just want to go kind of make sure I didn't miss anything. Did we have any public comment that came in otherwise? Okay.
I didn't see any, did you, guys?
Nancy, can I just say that it's really nice to see so much positive stuff coming in, like after this year that has been so heavy, to actually start to see like kind of these things start to trickle in. It's so nice.
It's nice to see everybody's faces fully, too.
Yeah.
I have to say that. Thank you.
Are we going to pause for a moment to check in on recognitions? I know we did the science fair.
So are there other recognitions? That's a good point.
I wanted to make one more. I wanted to recognize the absolute commitment and brilliance of our former chair,
You're here.
Amanda Fargiano, who carried us through that pandemic like a stormtrooper who never slept
No.
and never took a wrong step. You know, I have to say it was just incredibly impressive, your performance all year and your level-headedness and your generosity. And it was just, I felt like I was witnessing grace. In fact, I was trying to compare you to a literary genre in my mind while I was swimming. And I was thinking, well, Leah is the medieval ballad. And I am a Japanese haiku. I think that Nancy's more like an Emersonian or Thoreauian discourse, and you are Wordsworth's prelude. Now, let me talk about that just for a moment. The prelude is almost impossible to read because it's so expansive, and we all say we've read it, but we haven't. But it is such a magnificent text, and it brings into the literary world of the 19th century a heart as wide as the sky. And it's so infused with love for humanity and such a generous spirit. And even though I don't want to read it all the time, or all of it, my life would not have the richness it does without people like you, Amanda. So I'm just incredibly grateful.
Well,
Wow, Meg, I don't even know what to say to that. I didn't know Wordsworth had a prelude.
I have a literary genre for you too, but
Tell
I'll
me
talk to you
offline.
later.
Yeah.
I also want to add the level of
Bawdy
organizational
18th
thought
century
that you have
poem
brought
by the Earl
to
of
the
Rochester.
position here and to all of us and keeping us on track has been phenomenal. So,
Yeah, I
and
have
much
to
appreciated.
agree. Like the amount of research, work, organization that had to go into keeping us moving this year was immense. Like, I could not imagine having done your position this year, and you did it so well. So, thank you.
Well, you all are way too generous because we are a team, and I did not sit in the policy working group meetings. You guys worked tirelessly. I did not sit in the reopening advisory committee. I couldn't have done anything without Nancy because I never served as vice chair before I was chair, so I didn't have my training wheels. So, we're a team, and thank you for your kindness, but let's move on.
Okay, so I just want to make sure. I think we're moving into the superintendent's report, though.
Yes. Okay. So just a very quick enrollment update. As you can see, we have moved into our 2022 information. So you won't be seeing the old 2021 stuff anymore, but what you can see on this is that right as of this moment, we have 428 new students who have enrolled in the Hopkinton Public Schools. And I know very frequently people will say, well, what about the kids who are exiting? And we don't typically learn about them until after June 22nd. So if a family has decided that they'll keep their children in Hopkinton, then they're moving out of state or they're moving to another community, we'll learn about that then. But we did just graduate 328 students. So at this point in time, we are exactly 100 students more than we are currently, but for next year. But that does not necessarily mean that won't change over the summer months. And typically, too, we get an enormous number of kids who will be starting to enroll in August, because lots of times people will come into the district, they buy a home, and then when August 1st rolls around, they say, oh gosh, we should register the children for school. And that's typically when they do that. We did have a lot of conversations throughout the winter months about how many kids had left the Hopkinton Public Schools to either be homeschooled or to go to private schooling, and we have 24 returns at this point from those two learning settings.
Out of how many? Sorry.
Oh, I didn't put that exact number, but I think that that number was somewhere in the 50s.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Just a few student recognitions. I won't read through that whole thing, but the MIAA has recognized our girls varsity basketball team. According to Mr. Cormier, it's kind of an interesting story. They really didn't submit until people started to see this on social media, and then they were encouraged to submit. And of 68 teams, the Hopkinton High School girls varsity basketball team came in first. So what their service is that they prepare and serve dinner to the homeless in Worcester. And so that's, just a really nice accolade from the MIA that we weren't expecting.
That's great.
As you know, we, in the past several years, have started to do the Seal of Biliteracy here in Hopkinton. And so in Massachusetts, there is a Seal of Biliteracy. It appears on a student's diploma. And, typically that happens at the high school level, but you could really qualify for the Seal of Biliteracy at different grade levels. So, for example, if you moved into Hopkinton and you were fluent in a first language, and then you were able to, achieve a score of, say, 501 in the ELA MCAS, it doesn't really matter in what year you do that. So there is a Seal of Biliteracy and then a Seal of Biliteracy with distinction, depending on the scores that you earn. You could also be a native speaker of English, but then have a particular score on some other kind of world language or foreign language exam. So you could be an English speaker and qualify in French or Spanish or Russian or Telugu or some other language. So just so you can see how our students did in 2021, despite the pandemic, we are seeing some pretty excellent results. And so I want to thank Marilyn Miracle, who is the subject matter leader for world language, as well as Jennifer Suker, who, as you know, is our L coordinator and the director of equity and access in the district. So we had 6 juniors this year who earned the seal with distinction. We had 11 who earned the seal. We had 6 seniors who earned the seal with distinction and 25 who earned the seal. In 2020, We had seniors only. We had no junior testing at all in the midst of the pandemic, and we may have had more seniors. We can't be quite sure, but we did not offer retests because of COVID. And so we had 6 students last year who earned the seal with distinction and 18 students who earned the seal. And then in our very first year of doing it in 2019, we piloted in 2018, so we had our first official scores in 19. We had 12 who earned the seal with distinction and 15 who earned the seal. So our program it's thriving, I think. And then graduation and the car parade for the class of 2021. I debated using this for a recognition, and perhaps I should have, but I do want to say thank you to Mr. Bishop and his entire administrative team and the staff at the high school for what turned out to be an amazing graduation after a year that was pretty trying. And I also want to thank our building and grounds crew. And what you don't see necessarily standing out in that picture are 1,600 chairs. And so getting 1,600 chairs onto that field, as well as a stage, all of that tech equipment, all of the musical instruments, all of those diplomas, it's just amazing what is required to have that graduation. And it goes off without a hitch, and you don't hardly ever notice what has happened behind the scenes. And so people worked very hard to make that happen. And thank you to the kids and parents. The car parade was amazing on Saturday as well. All right, so the class of 2021, just some guidance data, and we typically present this each year. When you're looking at so these are SAT subject tests and SAT summary. When you look at that middle 50%, it says where did the middle 50% in Hopkinton land? So there would have been 25%, say for example, in the biology category there, who fell below 600, and there would have been 25% who fell above or landed above 710. So the 50% of our kids landed somewhere between 600 and 710, and our mean was 659 with 28 students tested. So I won't read through all of those tests, but you can kind of take a look at where our students ended up in those places.
I would be really interested in seeing what the kind of normal numbers are, just as a comparison.
What the state and national averages are.
Yes.
Maybe I can ask guidance for that next year.
But also this year, very fewer than normal took the SAT because so many of the SAT dates were canceled, right? So
yes, if you look at the SAT summary at the bottom, we tested 220 students.
Yeah.
But you are right, because sometimes we'll have kids who will test multiple times.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's 328 in the senior class.
Yes, that's right.
So
yes.
Typically almost all would take it, wouldn't they? But I know from experience that many had signed up for multiple sessions that the site was canceled.
Yes,
so
that is true here and in many other places
right.
well. Yes. One thing that's been interesting, I think, about the SAT is that fewer and fewer schools are requiring the test. You know, so now it's kind of that optional. You can submit it or choose not to submit it.
Can I just ask, sorry, are the 32 and 31, those are the ACTs, right? I mean, is that a mix of SAT?
The 31 sounds like a...
what my understanding of those are raw scores, which are then scaled, and then the scaled scores become the 623 and the 635.
I see.
Because we do have PSAT scores that will be coming up.
But the ACT scores look
they'll be coming up as well.
Okay. Because those are usually on a 35 or 36 scale?
Yeah, that would be...
Yeah, something makes me want to say like 8 to 38 or something. It's a very strange scale.
Yeah, my only caution is that because so many people were unable to take the test, this year's numbers might not be representative. I'm not sure what other correlations there might be with what site a student would have chosen for their test, but it was fairly random which sites were canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And increasingly, colleges are not requiring these tests, so students may have just opted
that too.
out too.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, scores in the mid-600s are usually fairly good. So, I mean, just looking at that range is, it's very positive.
It's very positive, but again, my concern is that it might not be representative. you know.
It might be self-selecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense too.
Or luck, because
Or luck.
I don't know if it's self-selecting. There were many good students of all across the range that, through no fault of their own, through multiple attempts, the site's canceled. So, yeah.
How much does it cost now to take the SAT?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that.
My kids did it last year and I don't remember.
But it is what it is. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Oh, there we go.
that's
There,
not
yep.
the
There's
slide.
the
There is
ACT.
one in a minute that I'll show you that will sort of, I think, speak to what you're asking, Joe. Yes, but here are the ACTs.
Very low number on that.
Yes, and I want to say that the range on that is something like 8 to 38, which is a strange number, but we could look that up as well.
So once again, the 87 and the 220 can have repeat students in there, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
yes,
definitely. Yeah, and so if you took the writing, reading, and English, that would go into the ELA total section, and if you took the math and science, that would go into the STEM total section. Oops, sorry, I don't know if I don't know if I, where I was looking at those numbers before. Ah, here it is. So, and this might be helpful too. So if you look at the U.S. history number, for example, if our middle 50% were between 700 and 760, and our average score was 730, that's with only 2 students taking the test.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks maybe to the
Yeah.
question you were asking, Joe, about numbers of kids taking it. Like, those numbers look fabulous, but then you realize 2 students are
Right, right.
incorporated.
It
in
might
those
be
numbers.
interesting to just show it compared to the numbers who took it in prior years.
Yes.
But all in all, I suspect this year's numbers, as we get next year's numbers, hopefully a regular year, this will just be kind of an odd year to compare against.
And just some class of 2021 college plans. We have 5 students who are attending the University of Michigan. That's super unusual, I think. We have 27 who are attending UMass Amherst, and then we looked at some of the other kind of heavy hitters, and we have 16 who will go to Northeastern and 7 who are attending Boston University. So those are kind of our bigger private schools where kids are landing. The head of the guidance department shared with me that science, engineering, and business are the biggest majors of the year. And then Ms. Greco also noted that 9 students this year have chosen gap years as their options, and their plan is to enroll in college the following year. And so she did a little bit of kind of anecdotal research on that, and what kids are reporting is that, some of them said, I just want COVID to be gone before I commit to starting college. And other kids told her that, the issue for me is financial, and so some of them want to earn a little bit more money toward tuition. And she believes that is kind of underscored if we look at how many students have all told chosen Massachusetts public colleges. The number is 58, which is 17.8% of the graduating class. It's very high.
And when you said that the numbers are unusual, do you mean that just the number, that there's multiple graduates going to these schools? Is it normal to have these numbers of graduates going to the same school? Is that different this year?
So, yeah, that's what I think is a little bit strange. I don't necessarily know if we would typically have 16 kids go to Northeastern,
Yeah.
or even 5 students go to the University of Michigan.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and so it's hard to say, too, how many of those choices were made based on money? If a
Yeah.
college offers you that great package, you might choose it.
Yeah, if I could share an insight, Nancy.
Please.
Because my daughter was a senior this year. It was a different kind of year to be searching for colleges. And the reason was there were no on-site visits. There were no overnights at the school. We went to visit colleges where we could only meet one person who was behind a desk, who gave us a map to give us for a self-guided tour around campus. Universities weren't allowed to let us into buildings. So this is the kind of environment that students were making decisions in. And my hunch would be, And my observation in my daughter's case, a lot of decisions were made through consulting with their peers. So I think there was a lot of talk with recent graduates who chose schools, and talk with their peers in their class. Where are you going? What are you doing? And getting opinions that way. So it was a really difficult year to make such a big decision without any kind of face-to-face contact.
Yeah. I do think when a kid goes to visit a college, sometimes something magical kind of happens on that campus, and then they get very drawn to that space.
Whereas this year we would go and the campus was empty. So there's no real way to gauge. So word of mouth, I think, was very important.
So maybe that's one reason for those numbers, yeah. The COVID-19 vaccination rate update. This is fascinating. So this time, our public health director, Sean McAuliffe, offered me the statistics for the entire community, which I was very appreciative of. So if you look at the 16 to 19-year-olds, 95% of our 16 to 19-year-olds have had at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, if not both. Wow. So to have our 16 to 19-year-olds vaccinated at a 95% rate is absolutely amazing. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. And 12 to 15 is not so far behind. You know that the 12 to 15s haven't been opened up for all that long, and there may be some folks who are, you know, a little more skeptical about a 12-year-old than a 19-year-old, but they are at 67%, which is still a great percentage. And then the last one that I really liked on this slide was if we looked at your entire community, the population for people who are eligible, I believe, for the COVID-19 vaccine, 16,382, and the community is at 81% of the eligible people having at least one dose.
That's wonderful.
It's phenomenal.
That's wonderful.
Feels great.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, and when you look at the previous numbers that you showed with the 12 to 19-year-olds, I think when you included the 12-year-olds, you were down to like 50% or below. So in that period of time, it has grown to 67% and more than 95% for the 16 to 19-year-olds. That's amazing.
Yes. And in looking, too, the whole thing is amazing. The number of our parents, if you look at the age demographics in which most of our parents would fall, seems like a very high percentage and encouraging in terms of looking at how that impacts kids in our schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, maybe we need to shake up those 20 to 29-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how many were waiting till they got home from college. You know, I know that my son's peers who were not from here were waiting to get home. You know,
So, and there would be some, I would assume, only because I think my daughter is one of them, who is counted as a Hopkinton resident but was vaccinated under a California address because she goes to school out there.
Right. So that may be the reason for the 80%.
Yeah.
What does proportion of town individuals with at least one dose mean?
So if we took, say, the 16 to 19-year-olds, if we took that whole group, what is the percentage
okay.
you got it now.
That makes sense.
If we took all of those percentages and added them up, you'd get to 100%, obviously.
Well, that's...
What should we be taking, other than being amazed, what should we be taking away from this, for this operation of the schools, for example?
I would say comfort.
Yeah.
You know, I think we still have some parents who will ask about what will happen next year, will there be masks next year? And we've heard from the commissioner that, you know, everyone's coming back to school next year. There'll be no more remote instruction. But I do think that there's a variety, I think, of opinions on that, and there are still some folks who are skeptical and would still want their children to come to school and wear masks and all of that. And when I look at that 95%, for me, it brings great comfort. We have not had a positive case in the Hopkinton Public Schools teacher-student since May 5th.
Knock on wood.
Yes, I'm knocking on wood. And we did have our last round of swabbing on Monday of this week, Tuesday of this week, and they all came back negative again, so
Fabulous.
very good.
So pool testing is complete.
It is complete.
Excellent.
Yes.
In all, just for refreshing memories, of all the pool testing we did, there were only a couple that I can recall you saying that popped positive during the entire time.
That's correct. It was maybe in the very first and then the second iterations of it. The first one we had 2 and the second one we had 1. And that was around the time after, I think, April vacation when we had, a lot of cases that were coming up positive in our schools. But and at that point in time, it was really hard for us to know what was going on. And, through contact tracing, you could almost get back to student 0, and you could watch it spread from 1 kid to 4 kids to 3 kids to, how that actually, worked its way throughout the school, the community and the school community.
Nancy, can I ask a follow-up question of Dr. Kavanaugh on that data? I think with that information, a lot of people might be wondering why are kids still wearing masks in school? And I wanted to ask you, do you or do we have authority on that, or does the state still have a mandate in place that students wear masks? Is there flexibility for high school if 95% of the students, and I don't know what the rate is for teachers, but can you help enlighten that public discussion?
I know a lot of people are very interested in that question. Right now, we are still at 3 feet of social distancing. We're still 6 feet at lunch, and we're still masked. And that's where the commissioner is right now. I am hoping that all of that is going to change by the time we get to September 1. I mean, we know that the social distancing is because he's already said that. So the masking right now is, I think, the big question mark hanging over us.
But even right now, I know there's only a handful of days left in the school year. But do you have flexibility?
We do not. We could not simply say, okay, kids, take your masks off.
Right, okay. That's a state mandate.
It is indeed, yes,
Okay,
at this
thank
point
you.
in time, still, yes. So, disproportionality report. I know that folks on the committee had been interested in seeing this. I believe that the data I'm showing you is 2019-20. We don't have anything more updated. But I think that, this is another one of those pieces of information that I think will give us some sort of comfort as we look at these data. So what I have for you are special education demographics here, and this simply shows you by demographic who is eligible for special education and related services. So for example, if you look under the Asian students, we have 794 students who are identified as Asian students in the Hopkinton Public Schools, and 46 of those students have qualified for an individualized education plan, which makes up about 5.8% of our students. And what the data tells us is that if you look at the risk ratio over on the left-hand side, the state would turn any of those numbers over there yellow if they were in excess of 3. They would turn it red if it were 4 or higher. And so what we're hoping is that our numbers over there are always printed in black ink as opposed to yellow ink or red ink. So if there was one just piece of data on this slide that we would be looking at, we would probably wonder about the eligibility rates for our Hispanic or Latino students. We are still under 3, so the state would not cite us for any disproportionality, but certainly that's a number for us to maybe wonder why. On this one, placements in a separate school, again, if we take a look at where our students are, there is no disproportionality there as well.
Sorry, this is outplacements, so
Yes.
not in our district. Okay,
Correct.
So 21 total
Yes.
or 24 total?
Oh, 24, I'm sorry, yep.
Where are the other 3?
I was going to ask that, but
Yes, so I wonder if they just don't list them if it's under a particular number.
Oh,
Like sometimes, they will do that when we're looking at, say, MCAS results, and then they'll say, what is the student growth percentile score for this subgroup, and if the subgroup is fewer than 20, they wouldn't list them. My guess is the threshold for this would be obviously lower than 20.
Why do we have an asterisk on the 1.03? Is that, did you put that there, or does it come with the
I
report?
did not. No, it came there. I think it's just maybe connected to, or alternate risk ratio if applicable. So these are, they will do disciplinary removals for over 10 days and for under 10 days. Because the district had 0 that were over 10 days, I thought I would just incorporate this slide right here. So we did, in fact, have 10 students on IEPs who had some form of disciplinary removal in the 1920 school year.
And less than 10 days, you said?
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
fewer than
Okay.
10 days.
Just verifying. Thank you.
Oh, that's 18, 19, I'm sorry. And this is out-of-school suspensions or expulsions over 10 days, expulsions of 10 days or fewer. So the first one is just disciplinary actions. This one is an out-of-school suspension. We didn't have any expulsions per se, but we have had suspensions. And that would, typically be like a single-day suspension or a 2-day suspension or maybe a 4-day suspension. But again, this would be 10 days or fewer.
You know what would be an interesting comparison point for me, at least, in terms of proportionality, is out of the students who do not have IEPs,
Sure.
what percentage have any kind of, so that we could see that the percentages are similar.
Yes, and I think it would be very interesting. So that's like 1.6% is the percentage rate on that, or for the whole district, 1.7. But I think the information that you're asking about, this information comes to us, through the DESI portal, and so we get this report. But what you're talking about is actually available in the public domain.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've seen that. But this is only available to school administrators.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so this is the all risk, and maybe I don't know if I can make that a little bit bigger for you. It's not making any bigger. But what you are seeing there are the Hopkinton kids who are not economically disadvantaged, kids who are economically disadvantaged, white, students of color, non-Ls, Ls, non-students with disabilities, and students with disabilities. So it's kind of an interesting batch of data there, because I think that you can kind of take a look at almost everybody there. If you look at the yellow highlighting, this is a place where the state said, oh, your risk ratio might be a little bit high there. So what that indicates is if you are an economically disadvantaged student in the Hopkinton Public Schools, you are 35% more likely to have a teacher who has less experience in the district than, or in Massachusetts than your counterparts. But what I thought was interesting about that is if we take a look at the percentages of the ELA and the math SGP scores, and those are growth percentile scores. So if we take a look at the students that we say are economically disadvantaged, and we take a look at the percentage of those kids with moderate growth, the percentage of those kids with moderate growth was at 83%. And so it doesn't really differ much from our kids who are white, or our kids who are Ls, or our kids who are, non-students of, who do not have disabilities, or students who do have disabilities. So you can kind of see that the ELA growth percentile score there, if we look for moderate growth, is about the same across the board.
This is for all grades that take FAMCAS.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Interesting.
I feel like you could spend a few hours with this
Yes.
data.
Oh,
and really,
you could spend the rest.
I know. It's hard to really pull out the highlights, but
So what is the concern with having teachers with less experience? Is the worry that, they don't react to the children as, I don't know, exactly as somebody who has more experience? Is it that they're not as smooth in teaching the curriculum? Like, what is the concern if you do see this disparity.
Yes, so educator experience and educator qualifications, the thinking is that if you are a person who has been teaching for fewer than 3 years, for example, we don't give you professional teacher status, right? Because we're still making you kind of prove yourself. And then after 3 years, you have professional teacher status, and so we start to say, okay, so, you are a highly qualified kind of a teacher. But what's very interesting, I think, about some of the research around this, they used to say that it took about 7 years for you to have sort of unconscious competence, meaning you could kind of walk into that room and you've taught that particular course or lesson or kids or subject matter for so long that you are just spot on. So that's why I think that they look at inexperience as being something where you may not be as talented as a teacher with more experience. And of course that varies from teacher to teacher, obviously. But if the state wanted to capture it, that's sort of how they do that. And then with things like educated qualifications, they would expect that teachers are certified in the fields in which they're teaching. And so the rule has always been that you could teach 20% outside of your area of certification. So as an English teacher, for example, if you had minored in Latin in college, you might be able to teach one section of Latin 1, totally legit, but they would say that, you're not really technically qualified to teach Latin 1, but you can do that if you like. So that's kind of, in the pandemic, I think that they were allowing, the percentage went up much higher, like it might have been 50% outside of your area of certification during the pandemic because they were having so much difficulty putting teachers in classrooms.
But we don't know if that disproportionately impacted our L students or others.
Right, because this is 2019-20 data, it does say up there in the red line, the COVID-19 pandemic had a profound impact on 19-20 school year, and so the data reported below may have been affected.
Okay.
Thank you. Sure. I did include a couple of other things. Here is our 2019 official accountability report for the entire district. And what we see across the entire district is that 85% of our students were meeting or exceeding targets. And if we take a look at the next slide, these are the access test results. And again, the percentage that were making that kind of effective progress was at 84%. And so you might be thinking, oh, 84, 85%. That's not atypical for a school district to be in that place. But I know that people will always ask, how do we address that? And while I can't show you, obviously, the kinds of data that we keep on our students, it's pretty amazing if you ever saw the data sheets that we keep, all of our kids who qualify for L services or an IEP or some kind of reading services or, just almost anything, or behavioral or OT or PT or speech, any of that are kept, and we keep mention of the interventions that we tried in grades 2 and grade 3 and grade 4 and grade 5 and what worked and what didn't. And so it's really pretty profound, the kinds of things that we are doing and we continue to do. It's not as if we've just said, well, we have it and it's magical and that's great. I think that all of the work that we've been doing with things like reading and those addition and math growth at the elementary level, and now we're moving into secondary, are really important, I think, in making sure that, that we're just not comfortable at 84 or 85, that we want to keep striving for something else.
In terms of the proficiency levels, I'm seeing, like, at the overall score level, it's kind of like bell curve-ish, right? So are you expecting the majority of students to be sort of at the developing and expanding level? Is that the idea? And then, a few students are, like, going towards bridging and reaching.
So I think one of the things that you might notice, so see under listening where you get, and these are all the same test takers, obviously, right? So you've got 69% of the kids are at reaching, but when you go to speaking, you've got maybe 40%, 23% are in that developing and expanding. And then, and then when you get to reading, for example, those numbers are, even higher when you get to the entering and emerging. So what we know is a little bit typical about English learners is that they get their receptive vocabularies will outpace their expressive. So they're pretty good at like taking in the information. They're like, oh, I got it. I know what that means. But then to be able to say it is different, because speaking and listening are those primary discourses. They're things that you just do naturally in the world. And then reading and writing are things that get harder and harder for kids to do.
Thank you.
All right. Are you ready for a flip? Okay. Okay, and the last slide we've already seen, that was my highlight, which got me very emotional in talking to Jim Cousins, who's just like, Hopkinton is the most special place ever, and that's all I have for you. I know that was a long one.
Can you make those statistics available to us?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, because it's a little
certainly
much
can. I can
to
share that with you, and I could
absorb.
I think Georgette actually puts these reports all the time on.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to
there's
say,
a lot of parents.
yeah, I think the superintendent's reports on the webpage. I think they are. Yeah,
Okay.
for anyone who wants to go back
Yes.
and look at all those.
And I only make that funny face because sometimes I think finding things on the website
Yeah,
can be that
they're
needle in
there
a haystack
somewhere.
experience.
We found it a webmaster.
But they're right to, Joe, I'm sure you must have seen them as well, right where our agendas and our minutes are. In that
It's always good to remind people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And honestly, I don't always know where these go because Georgette puts them there. So
I
they
think
just
there's-
magically go somewhere.
I think
Under
there's a
school committee.
superintendent page. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of parents who would find this interesting, even if they were unable to watch. So, yeah, so I'm definitely going to point people to look at this.
I'd like to go back and absorb it too, because there are a lot of percentages and things that are a lot to dive into, just kind of off the cuff. Any other questions? Okay.
Oh, I just have one question. Go back to enrollment real quick.
Oh, yes.
There were 100, so far a net of 100 new students anticipated for next year, right?
100 more than are currently here, yes, because
Yeah.
we've taken in 428, we graduated 328.
And as I recall, I think our budget was based on 70 some odd?
70-something odd, yes.
Okay, just pointing that out.
Just to clarify, yes.
Just to clarify.
correct.
We're already one classroom over?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just checking.
So we can move into the school committee chair report, and that will be Amanda.
Outgoing chair report. I'll do the easy stuff first. I did sign warrants 21073, 074, and 075 that are in the packet, and I also signed payroll warrant 21024 and 21025 in the packet. So, in a time of transition, as we are now moving from one school committee year to another, I personally like to take stock. I like to sort of look at what's been going on, how do we do, where are we, what's on the horizon. And as I was doing that for myself, I felt like the information was pretty interesting, and so I wanted to take a moment to share it as my outgoing chair report, so you guys can consider it. This is one person's take. It's not intended to be a committee report, but hopefully you'll appreciate it. So, as we all know, we are a legislative body. Most of our work is done through policy, so I took a look at what we've done this year through the lens of policy. And you'll see the snapshot with some data and a few metrics where I could find them easily by policy category. I didn't want to pester Dr. Kavanaugh for a lot of information, although I had lots, there's always things you want to report on when you're looking at our policies to see how effective they are. But I tried to use information that I could find on my own, with the exception of just a couple of things that Dr. Kavanaugh helped with. Next slide. So with that in mind, the first category is foundations and basic commitments. I really looked at policy AC, which is our non-discrimination policy, and sort of in the realm of that policy, we did a few things this year with the anti-racism pledge that we signed, voted on 7/9/20. The Freedom Team liaison, Leah's been doing an excellent job on that. Many of us attended the 2 3-hour active bystander trainings, and with Dr. Kavanaugh's goals, we did prioritize the DEI work that she has done this year. I pulled out some metrics, again, related to diversity, and this is from DESE, and the link is active. I also pulled out marathon in particular as a leading indicator because a lot of our new families have young kids. So we look at the district as a whole as about 67% white, but at Marathon we were 59% white. I know Dr. Kavanaugh has talked about white becoming a majority minority, and it's just interesting to just sort of see the trends as you look. District as a whole is 24% Asian, 31% at Marathon. High needs kids are 26% for the district, 33% in Marathon. I'm not a special education expert, but I do believe that some kids do move out of special education as they get the services early and no longer need those services later on. So I'm not sure exactly how to interpret those two different numbers. L's are 7% in the district, and you might be surprised to know 25% at Marathon. So 1 in 4 students in Marathon is coming through as an L on DESE. And I just pulled some numbers for the staff. I thought they were interesting. 94% of our staff, we've talked about this a lot, is white, 91% at Marathon. I know it's a harder number to impact because of contracts and so forth, and it's a lot slower to make change. But you can compare that to 88% across the state for white staff. So things that came to mind as I was looking at this, maybe consider our next steps in DEI training. I think we had another module of visions training that we didn't quite close out on, so I don't know if that'll come back in FY22. Also consider any policy additions or modifications for DEI, and I know we've had a first reading on one new policy that came through, and continue to consider how we bring more diversity to the staff. Under governance and operations, I looked at mostly, 2 main policies, policy review and our powers and duties. Our policy group worked hard to bring forward 14 policies this year. 11 were modified or newly adopted, and the primary focus, from what I could tell looking back, was COVID-related and also some administrative and legal updates. We had 40 meetings. Yay us, we've been together a lot. 19 executive sessions. Normally there's one every so often, but we had a lot of negotiating this year. We renegotiated 2 contracts, and there are 2 in process, and there were several memoranda of understanding for the reopenings. As you know, we also found that reopening fell under our jurisdiction, which we learned as the year went on. And we reopened ESY in the summer, and then in the fall, hybrid elected and fully remote. And in the spring on 4/5 and 4/26, we reopened to everyone who would like to come back. I didn't pull metrics, but I do want to highlight some considerations that I've heard from committee members about the time commitment. I mean, as we think about even people running in the future, how do we make the job manageable with a paying job during the day? I mean, it's hard. And so time commitments for members this year was a bit of an anomaly. But also, how do we leverage the strength of our team in our liaison work? Because we have some strength that I don't know we fully tapped this year, so I apologize for that. Next. Under general administration, really it's the student handbooks. We did adopt those last September, and the changes were focused on COVID and general housekeeping. And I put in here also the programs of study that we adopted in March, and highlighted in particular the new course offerings in HMS and HHS. HMS added the foundations and applications of numbers for grade 6, so I think that's now available in all 3 grades in the middle school. And in the high school, we added global citizenship for grade 9, respecting human differences for grade 9, and then the band and orchestra primer, math, ELA, and biology remediation, I think particularly targeting how we help our students who are going to be maybe sort of reintegrating with things in person in the fall, and also a stress and anxiety management class. No data here specifically, but I guess I would challenge the committee to think about, as we talk about campus planning and the educational requirements for the next elementary school building committee, that we think of our campus in terms of supporting our strategic programming. So as we're looking at like CVTE programming, or I know some schools have a room just dedicated to peer writing, a peer writing center, peer writing tutoring. So whatever it is that we think is important, we often need space to put that. So as we're thinking, we have 2 subcommittees that we're going to talk about later, and those are things to keep in mind. Fiscal management, I pulled out, just looked at policy DA, DB, DD, and DK. Easy for me to say. What I found interesting about DA, which I actually never read, but I wanted to highlight it for the committee, is that DA is where it basically says we are responsible for the budget, but our first responsibility is to the educational programming and meeting the educational needs of the district. It states that very clearly. And I think we don't often read that policy. It's very short, but that's a pretty powerful sentence that we need to keep in mind in budgeting. We passed our budget, thanks to all of your hard work, both of you, on communicating our budget. And I want to highlight that our education spending is 54.9% of the town budget. If you click that link, it's a pretty ugly little working sheet that I play with on my own for fun. But I did pull data from the ClearGov sites of many other towns. And what you find is that for towns that are 75% or more family homes, as defined by ClearGov, which we are, 54.9% is actually the average, to the decimal, of the percentage of municipal budget for education. So people feel like it's high maybe or different than they'd expect. It's actually quite average for towns that don't have a lot of non-family homes. I signed 120 warrants or more, and let's see. What else? Grant funding, we had a presentation on 10/29/20, so I just flagged that in there. The focus of a lot of our grant money was on COVID, DEI, social emotional learning, career vocational technical ed, and special education. And I guess for considerations, I would consider the educational funding needs and our per pupil expenditure. We continue to talk about our per pupil expenditure being very low and going lower every year compared to, as we add pupils and we don't really increase our spending proportionally. Our per pupil expenditure is getting lower and lower compared to the state average, and it makes me wonder if what we're sacrificing to keep it at that number. So I just share that for consideration. And just a administrative point, this year we did a lot of signing virtually, and I don't know if that's going to be a process that stays for the future. For support services and facilities development, I looked at a few policies. We had face coverings that came on board, and then we rescinded it according to DESE guidance. Safety and security and transportation services in particular. I think we did a very good job implementing pandemic protocols with good safety outcomes. And we were able to secure in our budget the rest of the money needed to finish the job of doing the work that was highlighted in the security audit from several years ago. So that's a good thing. For considerations, I mean, these are just, my pie in the sky. I was really motivated by Ms. Rothermick's energy report, and it does make me wonder if we might consider a district green policy of some sort that would maybe guide some of our decisions. I know that Dr. Kavanaugh has done innumerable videos on traffic management. So thinking about the fact that we have more people and, it's hard, we don't have more roads. I think the question is, can we reduce the cars on the roads? And so I guess I'm looking to think maybe in the future about policies that might encourage bus riding, carpooling, satellite drop-off, anything in that could sort of help take the congestion out of our very busy school parking lots and so forth. And policy FA, again, never read that one, but I did for this. And I guess I would consider, that's a policy that we don't have, but they have an MASC, and it basically is a statement of philosophy on facility development. And given that we have a lot of facility development on the horizon, I just identified it for consideration. Instruction, I looked at home instruction, curriculum development, and instructional materials. I just pulled a couple of things that I saw on the Equity and Access site, that we did a Diverse American Voices program for grades 8 and 9. And there's a lot of DEI teamwork. We heard about interrogating the curriculum and working with Grant Hightower. I know for instructional materials, we did bring in a lot of culturally responsive texts through the work that Ms. Parson did. And just a few pieces of data, there were 36, I think, when I asked. So maybe this number is not correct, but I think I was told there were 36 homeschooled students in this year. 6 of them in this year rematriculated. I know the number's higher now, but that's looking at FY22 as well.
Yeah, and I think the number that I gave before had homeschooled and private schooled kids, which is why it was higher than 36.
Okay. I did ask Dr. Kavanaugh to check with Ms. Parson because we had a lot more traffic through our homeschooled policy. And I did ask, with all the increased applications, how did our policy hold up? Did it serve the needs of the families and the administration? And according to Ms. Parson and the work that she did, you said with Megan as well,
Yes.
to go through the applications and work with the families. It seems that a policy is fine the way it is. So I guess if there are any community members who are watching and have any concerns with our policy that we didn't hear about, please share. We have a guidance report tonight. This is a bit of a metrics meeting, so if you're thinking like this is a lot of data tonight, we did talk about this being sort of a wrap-up metrics meeting. I just highlighted the DESI report card. I highlighted, again, one of my little wacky spreadsheets that I do for fun on the U.S. News and World Report. We fell to number 10, which, I don't really love these rankings anyway, but I did do a little bit of a deep dive in this. It looks like we are outpacing the people who are ahead of us, who are public school districts, except in the category of our 10th grade MCAS performance for our high needs students. It looked like, I think, we tend to be about 87% proficient or greater, and I think for the high needs it was more like 53-54%. And that gap was a bigger gap than Lexington and so forth. So, hopefully in the future we can talk about that and where we go with
that's very notable. I mean, you're saying that in the midst of a long string of analysis and data, but that is very notable that you'd moved from number 1 to 10 and you're drilling into the data and you're seeing that it's 10th grade MCAS proficiency for special needs students is what's driving that change.
That's what I saw,
Yeah.
but I'm not a
it would be good to
professional,
get,
so
yeah.
I don't know what
It'd be good to
Mr.
dig
Bishop
in.
and Dr. Kavanaugh would say.
We've actually had 3 meetings on that topic.
Oh, great.
Since,
Just a point of clarification, I think high needs is not just special needs.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Socioeconomically challenged and English language learners.
Yeah, sorry.
Still.
So that's why I put that as a consideration.
Ready?
Yep. For J students, we had JH student attendance, JLB financial assistance, JIB student involvement in decision making, which is a policy that we are currently working on, and JICFB bullying and prevention and intervention. Our actions, we began looking at JIB. We also commissioned a bullying subcommittee to review. We're required to do that every couple of years, and they go deep and look at that policy, and we're going to talk about that later. Attendance, I did ask Dr. Kavanaugh for attendance data for this year. I know it was a little bit of a strange year, and some people felt that kids weren't really showing up, or were they showing up? And it actually looks like our chronic absenteeism, as reported, was lower than normal, for what that's worth. Again, this year's data is different, but...
No vacations.
There was nowhere else to go but school.
I'm sorry, did you say you were hearing people have been telling you that they were concerned people weren't showing up?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
I heard that. It just, not like all over the place, but a couple of people said, I was like, I wonder what our data is actually looking like. So.
Was that for asynchronous learning time? So I wonder if that was counted differently in terms of attendance. I know at the high school, for example, up until they added in that one period a day, there was not attendance.
Well, there was nothing to show up to.
Right, exactly.
So financial assistance, this was interesting for me. This is the second thing that I did ask data on. In fiscal year 20, there were 95 families who applied for financial assistance and were approved at 100% assistance for fees and the like. That's what the financial assistance, lunch, I think, and fees. In fiscal year 21, 59 families applied for assistance, or were granted assistance at 100%. One application was denied. In fiscal year 22, so far, and my guess is this comes out of the bus registration, bus pass registration, so that's the first fee that hits.
Yeah, so Susan, you can help with that question. So when people are applying for financial assistance, I think it can be done through transportation or through food service, is that correct?
If somebody qualifies for free or reduced lunch, because that's a program that it's confidential, but if families fill out what's called a sharing information page, then food service can share with the financial assistance program their qualifications, and then that would be reflected as part of the financial assistance. So it's either that sharing information through the free and reduced lunch program or an actual application.
I wonder, just in looking at the data, if the number is lower this year than last year, if that would be impacted by the fact that lunches were all free.
Yeah, so I think that had a big impact. Lunches were all free, and also a lot of people were not riding the bus. A lot of times, reason that families apply for financial assistance is for the bus.
Right. Which is probably what we're starting to see early with fiscal year 22 numbers, right? Those are probably a lot of bus.
So we actually are being more, I don't want to say aggressive, but more accommodating in really reaching out to families and making sure they understand they can apply for financial assistance. So I also think that is a big difference in our numbers for next year as well. Typically, we wait for the application or we wait for staff to identify, but we're actually reaching out to families.
That's great. The one thing I wanted to point out of the financial assistance numbers, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we provide 100% assistance for families that are 150% of the federal poverty level. Is that correct? I think it's 100% at 150% of the poverty level, but then if you're 200%, you get 50%.
Correct.
So there are districts who, if you're 200% of the poverty level, you receive 100% assistance. There are different scales in different districts. So I guess I just highlight that for the committee to think about if we are concerned about our socioeconomically disadvantaged families and we think that we want to look at our scale. It's just something that we could discuss. Bullying, we had 3 incidents reported. Oddly enough, they all came after we got our annual report on 5/6. Of those, 1 was confirmed, 2 investigated with no findings. So when I say the considerations of the funding breakpoints, that's what I'm talking about. What percentage of the federal poverty level do we think is appropriate to offer what level of assistance?
So just as a clarification point again, when it says 2 investigated with no findings, that does not necessarily mean the child was not harassed at some point. It just means that it did not rise to the level of repeated harassment.
Or at least the definition of bullying, yes. So, imbalance of power over time, repeated, yes.
Okay, school community relations. We had a couple of public forums. We had 2 reopening working groups, 2 public hearings, 1 on budget, 1 on school choice, lots of office hours. Meaning the reopening advisory committees, did a lot of surveys, and we had a lot of email correspondence. And I guess considerations would be considering targeted office hours or listening sessions on specific topics. We talked a little bit about that before with diversity. And just wrapping up, we had other long-range planning initiatives. The MSBA submission for Elmwood. We have a campus planning study that was funded. We have ongoing enrollment tracking versus our consultant projections, which I know the community has been very pleased with the fact that we're doing more long-range planning. This is something that they've been asking for, and I think we're trying to do this. Dr. Kavanaugh delivered a 10-year capital projection for town leadership, and we are looking at our school calendar subcommittee. So that is my year in review. Any questions?
Thank you.
No, that was very thorough. Thank you. It leads me to have an off-topic thing that I'd like to put into new business or something at some point, because I remember last year. Sorry, we were talking busing. I remember last year changing bus stops was a big issue. Especially with the short amount of time that people had to change bus stops. So having some kind of discussion over the summer about the bus stops and making sure that it's all out there and very clear for the public, I think would be important. So if we can add that at some point, it would be appreciated.
Made a note of it. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Very time-consuming, I'm sure, to pull all that data together, so thank you.
I think it's helpful because community members often ask us for assistance with things at a low level, and I think we really operate at the policy level, and sometimes we forget the levers that we have available to us. So I think looking at the policy and looking at what we've done helps remind me of where we can have influence to help ensure that the work we're doing is what we want to be doing.
And last year's elections occurred in July, is that right? Mm-hmm. So we had 40 meetings between...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been about a year, right?
Yeah.
I think it's great data. I will use that document as a reference moving forward. I think it's great. I place no moral judgment, positive or negative, on the details. Like, is it good or bad that we had that many meetings, for example? I would think about it. I don't want to talk about it here.
I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just
You know what I mean?
thinking.
So as a measure of efficiency moving forward, we may all do well to look through that and think about it. But it's excellent. Thank you.
Liaison reports. Anybody have?
I mean, it's up for vote later, but, you know, the Hopkinton Freedom Team is sponsoring the first ever Hopkinton Pride Parade. We have a vote later about the committee participating. It will be, I think, here on the road here at the school, and they're actually have been allowed to open some spectator spots. So originally it was going to be 150 people walking. Then the governmental policy, Governor Baker's policy changed. We were allowed to have 250 people, but we still weren't going to have spectators. Recently, we were able to open up spectator spots. So there will be spectators to the event if somebody wants to go and watch and not be a part of it. And I think that is all for now.
That's great. Thank you. Else?
I believe the two that I was liaison to are now officially disbanded. One was the Growth Study Committee. I think they're complete their work, right?
They have,
yeah.
Yes.
And big news, Amanda and I attended the Select Board meeting recently where they officially disbanded and released us from duty on the Elementary School Building Committee for Center and Marathon School. So that work is done. So
Good job.
Just in time.
Yeah, so Meg, you'll have to find a new liaison committee. I think you're a liaison to that group, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just the HOP Coalition met this week, and I think I shared with you all that there's a meeting next week, an educational forum for legislators and policymakers on the impact of cannabis on youth, which I think they've been studying, especially in states where it's been legalized, and they've seen sort of a rise in youth THC-induced psychosis. But there's data, I'm not an expert, but I am attending, and it's open to anyone of us who wants to attend.
Thank you. Okay, so that moves us into new business. We've already done the HEF grants and the Assistant Athletic Director. That brings us into new business C, the administration vacation carryover, and that's you, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure. So I'm really putting this out there to you on behalf of our amazingly hardworking administrative team for this year. As you may remember that last year we did the same thing. So after March 10th, with the pandemic, really the administrators were unable to use their vacation time between March 10th and June 30th. And we were sort of hopeful that this year we were going to be able to use some vacation time. But as you know, last summer, I think the entire admin team spent the entire summer thinking about what the new schedule was going to look like, how many desks did we need to move, how many touch points would we be cleaning hourly, all green days, orange days, all the technology that went along with it. And what we have found is that they have really been, again, this year, unable to use vacation time. So the ask here is that you permit administrators to carry an additional 5 vacation days from FY21 into FY22, if you are comfortable with that.
Do I always have to be the bad guy? I mean, I've never worked for a company where we carry vacation days. I mean, at one point, I think we could carry a total of 5.
Mm-hmm.
But it was use it or lose it, and it was to clear the budget of liability, meaning a financial liability of vacation time due. I would encourage everyone to take vacation days. Even in the midst of last year, many people did manage to take vacation days. I think it's important for balance, for sustainability of performance. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think the one thing that they would say is a little bit different is that, let's just pick one of our administrators, so and especially at the elementary level, if you think about someone like Mrs. Carver, Mrs. DeBoe, Mrs. Bolello, they have 600 little people in there that they are responsible for every single day. So in their absence, and I know that we would encourage them, take a day here or there, but during the regular school year, no administrator would ever take, no building administrator would ever take a week's time off. I mean, a building cannot exist without its principal, I think, for a week. And if it did, it would be one of those things where people were really pitching in and hobbling along because it was an emergency, not because it was a luxury. And so I think that might be the difference, is that, in a typical office setting, you might be able to, set your email on, I'll be back on, Monday, June 13th or something. Don't contact me until then, or don't expect an answer until then. But we can never say that to 600 little people. And so
that's very touching, if I may, Nancy, through the chair. So then, why would we be giving 5 additional vacation days next year that we know the administrators won't take? And what happens to these vacation days at the end of a career? That's where this is all going. But if it's really about vacation days, how many this was an atypical year, of course.
Yes.
We've said almost every meeting, acknowledged the amazing work of the administrative team. Everyone has worked above and beyond, more hours than a typical year. And I can understand why this year it might be difficult, especially to take a vacation day. But what is the appropriate number of vacation days that we would like our team to have next year? That's all. That's what I would like to base next year's vacation days on, not whether they deserve 5 more because they didn't take them this year, but what is the right number for next year?
So I'll tell you the way the contracts are written, and this is across the board. Every administrative contract affords our people 25 vacation days, and you can carry 10 over year to year. So typically, an administrator gets 35. But I will tell you that most of them will use maybe the 25 and always keep carrying the 10 over. So they don't accumulate. You'd never get to a place where you had 150 of them. You could never have more than 35.
Okay.
What they're really asking is to go to 40 this year. And we have had a conversation as a team about, the challenge of actually using all 40 of them.
Right.
Sometimes we say July is the time to take them. If you can take your vacation time in July, that's really smart to do, because that's really the downtime for school districts. And even on August 1st, we start ramping up again. The other places, I think, where they may be able to use them, in the December holiday, the February holiday, the April holiday. But what starts to happen in April, for example, or in February, they start to say, okay, now it's time to do teacher evaluations. And it's really hard to sit and write 35 evaluations for 35 teachers in the regular school day, so I'm just going to save February vacation and spend all of my time doing them then. And so that eats up those days. In some ways, we haven't had conversations that we have to get better about just saying, I'm going to take them. Like, nothing's on fire, I have to be able to let it go, but we are at the same time really lucky that we have people that are so devoted to the work that they won't take anything but really high standards. We really do have that blessing and curse.
So to contrast, I do work in a job that allows rollover PTO, and one of the things that we see a lot is during the summer, people will take Fridays, like every Friday. So they'll always have like a 3-day weekend, and that's what they'll do a lot with their rollover PTO and such. Yes. I can understand why they didn't take those days. I mean, the load that we put on them, even asking for these rescheduled things happening 3 times this year, was insane. So I think that if we give it to them with the understanding that they will actually take them and relax and take some time for themselves, I would be okay with that from my end.
I mean, I doubt that they will become less hardworking over the next year. So to me, it seems like those 5 days is a kind of symbolic gesture. And I doubt they'll use them, but I'm fine giving them that gesture because they've given so much to us and our students.
Yeah, I think
when Amanda was asking Rich the question earlier tonight, like, how is it that you're working 60-hour weeks? I can tell you that probably every administrator in this district is doing that.
Mhm.
And it's super,
Yes.
not really healthy, but, you get a very good product, I think.
Through the chair, the last few comments, I am acknowledging that everyone works hard, okay? I guess Meg and I might look at the same thing and come to an opposite conclusion, because what I would like to avoid is symbolic gestures. If they're not going to use the 5 days, and they already have 25 vacation days, and in a typical year, not to mention this year, they don't use the 25 vacation days, I would rather stay away from getting in the business of symbolic gestures. I think that if 25 is already too many for them to take, I don't want to set up next year for 30 vacation days, knowing that they're not going to take 20 anyway.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
follow-up to that? So if on the, kind of looking at two sides of either doing it or not doing it, if we grant these 5 days, and that would give them then the 25 that they're granted for the 21-22 year, plus they're allowed to carry over 10 already, so that would be the 35, and then we can give them these 5, which would theoretically give them 40 days. When we get to the end of 22, will they then reset back to the 25 for 22, 23, plus the 10 carryover? They don't get to keep indefinitely accumulating.
Correct.
So that it's not, because the one thing that you were saying that got me thinking was, is there an impact when they retired later on where we have to buy out an infinite number of vacation days? And it sounds like that is not the case.
That's right. The most you would ever have to buy would be 35.
Okay, thank you.
So I kind of look at this like, I mean, if you look at this past year like a big project, because I think about like technology projects, that's sort of my industry, right? If you look at it as a project, a lot of times people work crazy hours in a project when deadlines are approaching. Typically the projects are a year long, and the crazy isn't a year long, but a lot of times what I've seen is then they get comp time, because they've worked like crazy, and then they get comp time. We don't have that mechanism to do comp time. And I think of, the fact that our principals were monitoring lunch, for example, because, there were concerns about exposure to COVID, so our principals were monitoring lunch. They were up on the phone till 9 o'clock at night doing contact tracing. This isn't the job, this is the COVID year job. And so they had administrative huddles, probably more weekends than not, trying to figure out how to address the positive cases and so forth. So, I get what you're saying, Joe, because it could be that we say, please take these days, you've earned them, and they still can't take them. And we've talked about it. I really do hope that we support a culture where our administrators can unplug when they need to, because I think that's healthy. But my goodness, I don't know where we'd be without them this year. I mean, they without us having to ask or say anything, I mean, they just owned the situation, and whatever hours that took from their family and everything else, they put it in there. They didn't have to do that, really. And so for those and many other reasons, I mean, I'm very happy to give them this. I hope they can take them. I hope they can take all these days and really recharge. It's been that year that you really need to recharge. Even if it's symbolic, this year I'm willing to be symbolic, because I feel like we don't have much else that we can do to say thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Through the chair, we do have a lot of ways to do it. We did it. We gave a 4% raise, which was extremely generous in a year like this for the town. So I understand the sentiments that everyone's worked hard. But if I may, can you remind me, this year, the year that you're talking about, the school year, goes to June 30th? Is that the year by which vacation days?
June 30th.
Yeah, okay. So July 1st to June 30th. And so can you help us with the data on the administrative team? I mean, what, how many hours, how many vacation days, 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 how many what is the average percentage of vacation days taken by the team for whom you're asking us to carry over 5 days?
Yeah,
Of the 25 days that they have on average, what have they taken?
I don't really have that information for you.
It's hard for me to know, because if they only took 10, then they still have, if they only took 10 and we're giving them 5 to carry over, I'm not sure how that helps with next year, because that means that there's already 15 more days available to them next year that they didn't take this year,
I agree. So when they went into this year,
Yeah.
they had 40 days.
Yeah.
Because you gave them an additional 5 last year as well. And now going into next year, they'll have 40 days. But I do believe that there will be a good number of our administrators who have not used all of those 40 days. So if you give them an additional 5, they'll still be at 40. You know what I'm saying?
I
And I
don't
know
what
what
they'll
you're
be at, 'cause
asking is how many of them
Yeah.
have or have not used all of those.
I don't think they're any are at 40 this year, is what you're saying, that they hadn't. But you mentioned they haven't been able to take as much vacation, but I don't have a data point on the average number of vacation days that the administrative team has taken for whom you're asking for 5 more to be carried over. So I will not be able to vote. I'll vote accordingly, I guess.
I think
I would need data.
I think one of the things that the 5 days, especially if we make it clear that we're not going to vote the extra 5 days next year. So this
did it last year.
is specific, but that was because COVID at the end of the year. So if we say, this is very clearly because of COVID, we're giving you 5 days, and it puts me in mind, I know this is going to sound silly, but at previous jobs I've worked, they had a quote-unquote sabbatical, but it wasn't really a sabbatical in the case, like a educational institution sabbatical. It was like an extra week, like on a really hard year, or maybe after you'd worked a certain amount of years, for whatever reason, the company could give you an extra week, but with the understanding that that week only lasted this year.
Mhm.
And so you had to take it this year or you lost it, right? And I think with that in mind, and once again, with the fact that they worked weekends, so they lost their weekends, I think I'm comfortable with the 5 days with that thought in mind.
Can I make a motion
Yes.
to approve the additional 5 days vacation for the administrative team?
Okay, so there's a motion to accept those 5 days.
I'll second that.
Is there a second? Any further discussion beyond what we've already put out there? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstaining.
Okay, so we have 4 aye and 1 abstention. Thank you. So the next item we have here is the school committee meeting dates for 2021 to 2022. Gotta scroll way down here. And it just for my memory, we're looking to vote the entire calendar.
I think so.
Yes, or at least to have a good conversation about where you'll be. So typically during budget season, for example, in November, what will happen is you will meet on Thursdays, and you see a lot of budget presentations then. But this year, November 4th, November 11th, and November 25th, obviously, are all Thursday holidays. So that eliminates a lot of days in November. September 16th is also a holiday in the calendar, and so if we were meeting the 1st and 3rd Thursdays, that would eliminate the 16th. So there are, a lot of those strange places. April 21st, for example, is April vacation, so would that move to the 28th? So we do have some decisions to make about this calendar.
Are we not allowed to meet on a holiday?
Typically, the school committee has not met on no school days. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't meet on Thanksgiving, but, if you have a date that is like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or whatever, we don't usually meet on those days.
So being new to the school committee, Oh, well,
You
not
can't
new,
say
I
that.
guess.
Well,
1 year.
Leah,
1 year in COVID, though. Do summers, normally, do you slow down meetings, or do you still have the same 2 meetings a month throughout the summer?
So we've done it different ways, different years, and it really is, we make that decision collectively. In some years, we have met like once a month, but we've met a longer period of time, and we've pushed it sometimes when people are able to in the day, so that we wouldn't be going until all hours of the night. Last year, I feel like we met more than twice a month.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what I was saying. My comparison
I
was
think
last
the year
year when we were
before-
meeting 3 times a week.
Right. I think the year before, we may have done every other week. I mean, two times a month.
2, I think we did, 2 or 3
Did we do-
total. We didn't do a
Okay.
ton.
So that would be something that, and I am aware of the time, just because I don't want the first meeting that I'm trying to manage to come back as
We're
everybody
testing
thinks
you.
I don't manage time. So if people want to consider this, I do believe it's okay to vote this at our next meeting. If you want to play around with how we want to figure out that the November and the budget stuff coming into December, and also, I mean, we already know we're meeting on the 17th.
Right, it's not
So
covered
that-
in here.
So, for me, sorry,
Yep, go ahead. What is better for?
but for me, once again, I haven't lived through a normal year of school committee. We didn't start budget stuff until late this year. I don't understand when the budget meetings start, what, like, so for instance, I see the 3 in December and the 3 in January, and I'm thinking that's probably budget reasons, but I don't know for sure. So, in order to be able to look at this and really ponder it, I would need to have a feel for like the rationale of, where does the budget normally start, and when do we, when are key meetings that we normally have with the town and things like that, which I don't.
So I don't actually think we were significantly off of our normal time frame, and not really at all for when we hear presentations during our meetings. We were a little bit later because the way the calendar fell out, like we moved to a Tuesday instead of the Thursday before, kind of a thing to vote.
Okay.
But not.
Okay.
It was within the parameters of what has always. In fact,
Okay.
years ago we used to have a February 1 deadline.
I thought we started rather early in the fall on budget planning this year.
The budget planning with the budget advisory
Yeah.
group, and with what Dr. Kavanaugh hears from her people, begins right away, really, in the fall, right? Is that
Yeah, pretty much in September
get-
we get started.
the budget message from the select board in September, I believe, in terms of when we do that joint meeting? Is that,
I like your proposal, though, that we look through this.
yeah, look through it, absorb it, and then we can come back next week and set,
Yes, and if I could make a recommendation, you may need to think about a different day of the week in November.
Yeah.
yes, it does appear that way.
When is Veterans Day?
Really rocking the boat.
Is Veterans Day the 14th? Or the,
Veterans
sorry,
Day is the 11th.
11th.
sorry,
Yeah.
11th. Oh, okay.
November.
Yeah.
Yes, and so November 4th is a holiday, 11th is a holiday, 25th is a holiday.
Okay, so we will come back to that next week. So the liaison roles, I believe it's included later in the packet what they are. We're not doing the total liaison roles, but there are some that need to be decided tonight just on the timeline of the subcommittees, and those are highlighted in letter E. Sorry, my eyes are getting older. Do we want to take these maybe, if everybody, I don't know if people have thoughts on what your strengths and what your strongest interests are, but the ones to divide this work up, because these are pretty meaty subcommittees. The bullying plan and intervention subcommittee, which will meet for, it typically is a few months, and then the calendar subcommittee, which is the follow-up from last couple years ago cycle on the calendar, the stipend working group with the HTA, which we're looking for a member for, ESBC2, Sustainable Green Committee, and Campus Planning. So, in looking at that, do we want to start with the bullying plan and intervention committee? And before we think about names, does anybody have any questions about the role, anything that you want to bring out just as we determine that? Okay.
I feel like I asked a lot of my questions when this originally came up.
Okay, so is there somebody who feels that they either would very much like to do this, or they feel like they've identified strengths that would be well done?
I would very much like to do it.
Okay.
The special ed angle is one that I will provide.
Okay, that's great. Is there anybody else that wants to discuss that, or do we want to go ahead and have a vote on that? Is that, because you need that name immediately?
I do. There are
Yeah.
a couple of these that we do need to vote
Okay.
tonight.
I
So,
make the motion to make Meg
thank you.
the bullying committee
Excellent.
liaison.
Second.
Second, so all those in favor, sorry, the motion was by Amanda, second by Leah. All those in favor of appointing Meg to that role, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any dissent? Okay. The next one is the calendar subcommittee. Is there anybody who feels passionate about this calendar? Okay, we'll come back to that then. But we will do it tonight. The HTA stipend working group.
I recommend Amanda.
I would second that. So the motion by Joe, I will provide the second. All those in favor of Amanda doing the stipend? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that is Amanda. The ESBC 2, is there anybody who has particular skills or interest in that group?
I recommend Joe.
I would like to nominate Joe.
Are you interested? I don't want to pin you into that if you're not.
I am actually, yeah.
Okay.
One of the reasons I ran for school committee was recognizing that in order to continue to deliver the value that we've come to expect from our schools, we need to have a rigorous facility plan in place. So I would be honored to help with
Okay.
that.
I in my head had kind of thought that might be an interest of you. So so we have the motion. I'm sorry, Meg, you suggested Joe. Do we have a second on that? Oh, never mind. All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Joe, welcome to your new ESBC iteration. Sustainable Green Committee.
I also have an interest in that one. We did great work with solar on the Marathon School, and we're reaping the rewards of the renewable energy credits on that.
I feel like you were requested for that as well.
Actually.
So I would like to nominate you to make a motion to accept you onto Sustainable Green.
Second.
Second by Meg. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. So so that leaves us with campus planning and also the calendar subcommittee. So we have those two. I would be interested in campus planning unless somebody else has a strong.
I would nominate Nancy for campus planning.
I would second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And I have my new assignment. And then the last one is the calendar subcommittee. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to do that, because certainly it's
do that.
okay. Excellent. I know.
You can finish your sentence.
Motion for Amanda. I make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have filled all of those roles, and we can move on to the school participation at the Pride event, which is event F.
Can I
did
just
miss
take one other comment
Yeah,
on
go ahead.
the liaison roles? And we can talk about this next time when we cover the whole gamut. But one of the things I wanted, because of the time commitment issue that we talked about, it would be great if we had an alternate to tap. Because I think sometimes we feel like we have to do it all, and some weeks work or life or whatever doesn't enable it. So if we can just make sure that we can talk about what we do when we have a conflict. If it's possible, if there's a committee that's possible to have an alternate. I don't know if they would all allow an alternate, but if it's possible, it'd be nice to have someone who could fill in. So
Coverage for, and I do believe we're going to need an alternate voted for the ESBC too.
Right, they do
Do
want
we
to.
want to do that? Do we need that tonight to move on what they've asked us for ESBC?
Yes, we will need
Okay.
that alternate.
So
That
is
would be
there-
Great, thank
I
you.
will.
You would like to be the alternate?
Yep.
Okay, so I moved Leah to be the alternate.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. I apologize, I am talking fast to try to move it
One
along.
thing that I would really appreciate, because Amanda did this last year, it was really helpful for
Yeah.
me, since, I work 9-hour days, is knowing when the committees meet. Because even if I'm interested in a committee, if it's going to meet in the middle of the day, I just can't commit to that regularly.
So That would be great if people could look at the list, and is this either...
ESBC, we wouldn't know yet.
Right, that's true, but so for the ones that we aren't voting on tonight, if people can let me know if you've been on one that is continuing on next year, when it typically meets and what the commitment is, just so that we can look at them at a future meeting to make that determination based on our own schedules, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, so that then moves us into item F, which is the school committee participation at the Pride event. Amanda, I know you had some communication.
I did, yep. There was originally a cap on participation, so I had let the coordinator, Freya Proudman, know that school committee wanted to put a placeholder in, but we needed to vote it as a committee because I couldn't speak on our behalf. But it did seem to align with our various values and our anti-racism, anti-bias pledge. So I did put us in as a placeholder. Since then, as Leah discussed, they have increased the number of participation and so forth. So, I don't think that I didn't want to miss our chance. So I put us in there. We're in there. I told Freya that we'd let her know after tonight. But there's a place for 5 of us if we want to march. I thought it was around the track. Maybe I think it's around the track at like 2 in the afternoon, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
On the 26th. And, we can have signs, or we can get T-shirts or rainbow-colored things.
Participation within the parade is still limited. So the spectators, like I said, they've opened up, and there's a higher limit on the number of people that can be in the parade, but it is still limited. So we do have the placeholders.
So we're in there as a placeholder.
As a placeholder. So people's thoughts on availability and interest in walking together as a committee?
I'd love to participate, and I hope I will be here. I might go camping, but I might not. So I'd like to plan for it.
Okay.
It's a great idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd love to participate too.
Okay. I don't think
and
we
I
actually
was
need
going to participate, HFT or here, so I'm all for it.
Do you know, are groups carrying any kind of like signs or anything like that that we would want to consider fashioning for ourselves?
So I spoke to the Democratic Town Committee, since I'm a part of it, and they were saying that they were being allowed to bring a sign and such. So I'm sure that if we want, we can talk to Freya and bring an appropriate sign if we wanted to.
Okay. We can discuss that offline then, what we want to do and what we're able to do signage-wise.
Okay, so just a point of clarification, since this doesn't have to do with our duties as school committee, we're allowed to talk about it as a group outside of here, just verifying and making sure.
Thank you, and it also helps for people watching us to know that we're complying with open meeting law and being able to discuss it's really more of a calendar thing offline. So.
And I received, you probably have this too, there's an FAQ document which was very helpful that Freya sent to me, so I can forward that to you all, or we could just distribute it.
Okay.
That would be great. It lays out the route and what to do.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you for bringing it forward. The next item is G, which is the Hopkinton High School B paraprofessional request, and that Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure. So in recent days, we've been doing some of our transition planning for students moving from grade 8 to grade 9 to the high school, and it has come to Dr. Zaleski and Mr. Bishop's attention that they will need an additional B para when the kids go from 8 to 9. Currently, she has a teacher of the visually impaired who'd be reduced in FTE from 0.8 to 0.5, so essentially that money will just be taken from that teacher's salary to pay the B para's salary, and technically all of that money is under the operating budget. So we're looking for your approval for a B para for the start of the next school year.
Okay. Motion or discussion?
Move to approve the para.
Motion by Meg. Second. Second by Leah. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So that carries. The next thing is the tech voting member participant, which is Dr. Kavanaugh, also you on that.
So tech, as you know, is a collaborative we belong to, and unlike accept, a school committee member or the superintendent could be on their board for voting reasons. So I am asking if any one of you would like to do it. If you would prefer, I am happy to do it. I actually enjoy going to the tech meetings. They are in Walpole at 8:15 on Friday mornings. So I am happy to serve as the Board of Director member on behalf of the Hopkinton Public Schools and School Committee.
Bless your heart.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank
yeah.
you.
My
So
pleasure.
is there a motion to appoint Dr. Kavanaugh as the voting member for tech for the 21-22 school year?
So
Yes.
moved.
Okay, motion by Joe, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passes. Thank you very much. And the next item is and I believe we have caught up here, the lease of Apple and Chromebook equipment. And that's Ms. Rothermich.
Thank you. So this is for 3 different items, as you can see from the memo in the packet. The first one is a new 3-year lease for various Apple computer equipment for the high school teachers. This is procured using the Massachusetts state contract, and the annual lease payment is $85,223. Funding for this lease comes through the operating budget, the technology budget. The second item is the MacBooks for the 1-to-1 program for 9th graders. The number of units is based on application, the families expressing interest in getting their computer through this program. Again, we use the state contract for the procurement. The annual lease payment is $46,000, and the funding for this lease comes from the participant payments, and that goes through the 1-to-1 laptop revolving account. And the last one is funding for Chromebooks. This is a replacement for the middle school, and this was put out to bid. We had 5 vendors that responded, and the lowest responsive and responsible bidder was American Capital. The lease payments for this one is $178,021, and funding for this lease will come from the operating budget, the technology budget again. So those are the 3 leases. 2 are coming from the operating budget, and 1 comes from the 1-to-1 laptop revolving.
We have to make separate motions for each of them?
It does appear so.
Okay.
Are there any questions before we look for a motion? Okay.
I'm just super grateful that Mr. Ghosh keeps us technologically equipped, because without his continual investment and management of these devices, we would have been in a real mess in the last 18 months. So thank you to you and Mr. Ghosh for this.
Okay, so I would seek a motion to approve the lease from Apple Education for $85,223.67 for the first one.
So moved.
So Leah, motion by Leah. Is there a second? By Meg. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The next one is I would request, look for a motion to approve the 1-to-1 laptop lease through Apple Education in the amount of $46,597.
So moved.
Motion by Meg. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that passes as well. And the final one is I would seek a motion to approve the American Capital lease for Chromebooks in the amount of $178,021.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda, second by Meg. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that passes as well. Thank you very much for bringing that forward. Then there is no old business on the agenda, so we can skip through that. Are there any future agenda items that people want to make sure that we get to?
All of those things Amanda mentioned in her year-end report.
The bus stop thing.
Yep, I got that.
Yeah, I figured.
Okay.
And I think we do have what was requested, a report coming forward on the high school edition at the next meeting.
Yes. As we were going through the enrollment numbers, I was wondering about that myself. Okay, so items by consensus.
Oh, my goodness. All right. As superintendent, I recommend the school committee vote to approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then I would finally seek a motion for adjournment.
Oh, yes.
Motion by Meg, second by
Leah.
Leah. Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's great. Thank you all for hanging in with this. Our next meeting will be on June 17th, which is next week, at 7 p.m. Here in the high school. So thank you all, and have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Well done, Madam Chair. You